Welcome to Recogs, the show where we learn how the world's best business operators build consumer brands from sourcing to selling, brought to you by Manufactured. Manufactured is an online platform that helps brands manufacture, finance, and distribute inventory across 20 industries and 25 countries. If your brand is looking for manufacturing help or inventory financing, check out manufactured.com. Today, we're talking with Chris Carter and Ryan McIntyre from Porter Road. Porter Road sells pasture-raised beef, pork, lamb, and chicken delivered straight to your door that is free of antibiotics, hormones, and GMOs. We discuss their mission and a bit of their founding story, how they partner with founders, when they first expanded to the online D2C channel, and their overall approach in their supply chain. And also how Porter Road is different to some of the other meat companies that are selling online. This was a really, really fun conversation. Without further ado, here are Chris and Andy. Chris and Ryan, thanks for joining me today. Thanks for joining me here today. How are you both?
Doing well. It's we're in the midst of our holiday season, so it gets a little crazy, a little operationally intense, but ultimately this is where all the planning comes to fruition. So it's so far smooth sailing.
Yeah, it's funny. This time of year, a lot of people will be like, "Oh, this is your crazy time of year." It's like, actually, for Thanksgiving, we're planning in March, April, because we're putting animals on pasture and raising them for this time of year. So it's all the planning that goes into it. And the fact that we're able to sit here and have a podcast with you today, I think says a lot about how far we've come in those 5 years. Because historically, I would be packing boxes with our other co-founder, James, on the line, getting them out the door. And I think Ryan's been there for a couple of those holidays as well. So it's a big deal for us to be in our homes at the butcher shop here in Nashville, also doing a podcast. So
How did you find which farms were kind of the quality that met your standards, that were you felt were doing it the right way, that it was like the quality meat that you were looking for. It also was like the life quality that the animals as well were having too. Um, what how did you kind of go around and find the right farms to do it? Because I'd imagine that there's probably not as many farms that are kind of doing it in terms of the quality that you're kind of looking for um, ar- around the U.S.
there are, uh, most of our animals in this country are raised to Porter Road standards. That 100% pasture raised, no antibiotics, no hormones, up until a certain stage of that animal's life, right? And it's those animals that we would see when we would drive through the country were spending their time on those pastures, on those beautiful pastures, being cared for and taken care of by a farmer that was passionate about what they were doing. But then where the big separation is when that animal is ready to be sold. And so where the commodity is coming in and purchasing those animals from behind those beautiful fences uh, is around a 600 to 800 pound weight, what we refer to as a yearling. And so it's that animal is raised pretty much to a Porter Road standard up until that point when that animal is then shipped out to the Midwest and enters into that commodity system where that's where the feedlot operations and things like that start to take place, where Porter Road really works in fixing the food system today is that we step in to that cow calf operation, which is what we refer to in that, those farms that we see out in the country again. But we step into that cow calf operation and we say, hey, keep these animals on these pastures for the entirety of their life. Continue to make sure that they're raised up pasture. If an animal gets sick, by all means medicate it. It just doesn't enter into our systems. And of course, no hormones whatsoever. And and then finish that animal on this pasture. And then we will actually take the entirety of that animal. And by doing that, we're incentivizing the farmer to sell a full harvest weight animal and then also sell it at a premium over the traditional market that they would sell it into for the commodity.
but at the same time, if you're then kind of extending like the lifeline in terms of the animal being on the pasture, right? By then not selling beforehand, going into like the commodity market. Um, and so in terms of how do you also like convince the farmers to actually not sell at that point, rather than sell at a later date to sell to you all at Porter Road?
A big piece of it is finding the right farmers that care about what we're doing. Um, we consider our farmers our farm partners. That's the way that we refer to them, and it is 100% a partnership between us and them. You look at Joey Rittenberry, which is our largest farmer in Western Kentucky, and the very first conversation that James and I ever had with Joey, talking about him raising animals for us, he brought his then, I want to say he was maybe 7 or 8. He brought his son Alex with him to that meeting, and that conversation started by him introducing Alex. He said, "Alex, this is Chris and James. These are the guys that are going to make sure that you have a farm to farm when you're my age." And that to me was the best way that relationship could ever have gotten started. And that meant that Joey really understood what we were trying to create, what we were trying to build, and he has been able to scale his farm, I would say, 10x from the day that we met him to where he is today. And he's still 100% raising animals on pasture. It's just an incredible place to go visit. And so a lot of it is finding like-minded farmers that have the same mission that we do. But then on top of that as well, we're paying a premium to these farmers in order to raise the highest quality meat that we can raise in the US.
It's also at a fixed price, right? So in the commodity industry, you've got suits in Chicago trading on the end value of these live animals. And so it's fluctuating every single day. It's fluctuating. And that's a really tough position for farmers and ranchers to be in, because depending on the conditions when they bought that animal, the conditions in which they raise that animal, they could all of a sudden lose money on every animal that they're selling because somebody in Chicago, shorted them or whatever. Like so we provide a fixed price at a premium that does not fluctuate with those markets. So farmers and ranchers can actually financially plan around that, right? They know what their inputs are. There's a farmers are very impressive when it comes to doing mental math, and so they know how much it takes to raise that animal to be finished, and how much margin that they'll actually make. So that just that pricing stability is also a big win that starts to attract supply into our system.
It's a really, really great point. Yeah. I mean, financially projecting and forecasting their business the way that the rest of us try to do is something that a farmer has not been able to have the insights into in 60, 70 years. Definitely a big piece of the puzzle.
That's really but in terms of like I mean, also as you said, Chris, in terms of like the quality of it, understandably, if obviously an animal gets sick, for example, you wouldn't use that. You obviously wouldn't use that animal at all, as is in that goes into your production. It would only be the ones, of course, too, that obviously were healthy and obviously didn't have to use any, and didn't have to be treated kind of in any way on that, in that sort as well.
Right. And you think about the way that our farmers are raising animals versus the commodity. One of the analogies we'd like to think about to really visualize these animals is kind of like kids going back to school, and you take all these children from different households, and you stick 30 of them in one classroom. They all swap a bunch of viruses, and then they come home, and then all the parents have runny noses and coughs as well because we stuck everybody together in one room. All of our animals are out on pasture with room to roam and graze naturally in a natural environment. So we don't see a lot of our animals getting, any sickness or anything like that. And then there's the documentation process too, which is the transparency in which Porter Road brings to the industry, where we can tell you where every single animal was raised, which paddock it was in, which animals it was hanging out with. I mean, literally down to you know whatever detail that you're looking for.
How after the animal is pasture raised and like talk a little bit about the process afterwards in terms of like the slaughtering process, who you partner with on that side, or if that's something that you all take on. Like how do you think about the whole process like after that phase as well?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things that Joey Ridbury, our farmer partner, says, and he truly means it. I thought at first he was just trying to make us sound good, but he really does mean it, and he says it all the time. I don't know if it's what we do here on the farm or what they do with the animal afterwards that makes it so special, but our product is second to none, and it really is, again, that partnership. Another saying that we have on our end of the system is that our flavor starts in the field, and that means that raising the animal correctly, you are what you eat. So making sure that the animal is fed correctly, making sure the animal can graze, build natural muscle structure, be, exposed to sunlight and rain and all the things that nature brings, all the way through to a humane harvesting of the animal, a dry aging process that Porter Road does that is very unique to any other product that you're going to see on the market, which is a whole animal drying process that takes place, and then coming into the facility where we're doing all the skilled cutting. We're doing a butchering process called seam butchery, which means that we are really truly honoring the life of that animal, looking for the highest level of utilization we can get. We are removing every single muscle from that animal to create a steak out of it. A great example of that is this summer, James, again, co-founder, who runs the facility along with Nick. Those guys are really on the production side. Very, I mean, incredible facility that they run there, but uh, didn't want to fill the freezer full of ossobuco throughout the summer because people aren't really going and cooking ossobuco. They're not running a 5 or 6 hour braise when it's 110 degrees outside in parts of the country. And so creating the volcano shank out of that same cut and creating this incredible, like smoking, I mean, very high skill level. I've never successfully cooked one, which I'm not too proud to say. Um, but it's an incredible piece of meat. And it comes from that same place where we'd be cutting ossobuco from. It comes from like the skill that we bring and that chef mentality that James and I have, and the way that we treat the animal and the way that we you know manage that inventory during times like this, and look for different cooking methods, and you know it's very involved, but it starts in the field and it runs all the way through from the way that we handle it inside the facility, cut it, package it, ship it to the end consumer. Every single bit of it adds up to that quality.
How I guess let's also talk about retail channels as well. How do you think as well about the DTC side of the business? When did that start as well? And selling online. And then also, how do you also think about wholesale and obviously with the butcher shop too, as well in Nashville?
Yeah, I mean, the Nashville Butcher Shop was, that's our, yeah, the very first, right? Like that's our baby. It's kind of the origin story of everything. Um, and from there we purchased a facility in Princeton, Kentucky, so that we could own and control more of that supply chain and be able to tell you, a full, transparent, authentic story.
And in terms of what you do at that facility, what specifically happens at the facility in terms of from the ownership on the supply chain side?
I mean, that's all of the production, the fulfillment, everything takes place under one roof. When we first launched porterroad.com, In 2018, we were operating out of a little 6,500 square foot facility. And working with the state of Kentucky, we actually moved into a 30,000 square foot facility a mile and a half down the road in 2021. So really setting ourselves up for the next level of scale. Um, but yeah, I mean, launched the butcher shop in 2011. Bought the facility, the first the 6,500 square foot facility in Princeton, Kentucky in 2014, 2015. Launched a wholesale business focused in Nashville. Um, in 2015, scaled that to 100 plus restaurants that we were working with, and really saw the opportunity to continue to support our farmers, purchase more of their livestock. You know, did some research on the computer, really understood that what we could do was very different from what was offered from any other online meat provider, which meant that we actually were touching our product and controlling that supply chain. So we could ship a fresh, never frozen product. We could we could offer an a la carte shopping experience, not forcing people into a subscription or bulk order only. And then we would eventually figure it out. But we also would have never shipped, frozen meat in a squeaky styrofoam container just because that wasn't really fitting what we were trying to do, as a company. And so we were going to ship all of our meat in a recyclable, biodegradable container to the end consumer. And that was really the big focus for us. And Ryan, we consider our third founder. Definitely. I mean, Ryan's been there since the beginning of porterroad.com and really stood that up. So I'll stop talking there and kind of let you talk about the D2C business, Ryan.
Sure. Yeah. Again, we a lot of work went in. I joined the team in mid 2017, and it's like, okay, we know we wanted to go to direct to consumer, but well, where do you start? And you have to start with inventory controls, and how do you get the 6,500 square foot facility in Kentucky, the inventory flows? How do you get that to talk to Shopify, which is the platform we use? And so it really had to start from the very beginning, establishing those workflows, some of those inventory controls that we've gotten more sophisticated over time. Um, how do you get a facility in rural Kentucky that was pulling a half a megabit per second to become a cloud-based inventory store? Well, you look at Chris Carter here and say, Chris, what can we do about this? And eventually we have a dedicated line coming from town all the way out to us to actually run the facility. So it's there's a lot of kind of early challenges. And then figure out what's the go-to-market strategy. What's our SLA on getting product to consumers? How do we ship out more product faster? Again, like, how do we control that inventory? How do we manage that inventory? And so that's been a big portion of it, because again, it is a complicated kind of demanufacturing process. We get really big hunks of meat, and we have to get it down into the most valuable set of little pieces of meat that you could possibly get, right? And that's where a lot of the hard work at the facility and a lot of that tweaking and tuning comes into play. Is making sure we're maximizing the value of every animal that we bring in, not only to honor that animal, but also to make it financially viable, to run a whole animal operation. Because for every 8 pounds of tenderloin you get, which everybody wants tenderloin. We're about to sell our last holiday tenderloin on December 4th for Christmas. You get 250 pounds of ground beef, right? So what do you do with that ground beef? That's where the wholesale business comes in, the online business. So it's been really fun and rewarding. And we're building a heck of a tribe out there in the direct-to-consumer land.
In terms of like expiration dates, how long? I know obviously that you once the meat's cut, you obviously freeze the meat on the D2C side and you ship frozen. But how long as well? How do you also think from an inventory control level as too? How long can the meat last for until that it still obviously tastes great when it's unfrozen and cooked?
So we do ship our steaks and our tender cuts. We do ship them fresh. Um, so yeah, so that's to preserve the incredible quality of that product. And when we get it to the consumer, we want to give them about 2 weeks to cook it up, so they can keep it in their fridge, in the roll stock packaging, for that period of time. Now, our grind products and like sausages, ground beef, and some of our low and slow cuts, like a big brisket. Those items we do freeze. When you're cooking low and slow, there's less quality degradation through, like, high and fast, like a New York strip. You put a lot of heat on it very quick, and if the freezing process didn't go quite right, well, you're going to end up with a bunch of juice on your plate as soon as you defrost it. So we want those things to stay in the product themselves. And then, on the grind products, once frozen, we try to get it out of the facility as quickly as possible. I mean, currently, every stitch of trim that we are creating during this holiday period, which is our peak period, is already spoken for in one way or another. So we've come a long, long way to not be, sending out the last packs of frozen ground beef like in July, from holiday production. So we try to get it out as quickly as possible, just because there's a good bit of value in there, and we have to turn that inventory quickly. So
As far as the fresh cuts go, you got to think about the life of a steak in your local grocery store. It comes from a facility in the Midwest. It goes to a packing facility. It goes to a broker. It goes to a distribution facility, all before it makes it to that grocery store. In the Porter Road system, it goes from the farm, harvest, cut, or dry age, cut, package, ship. So we're cutting off, weeks of the timeline for that meat to actually reach the end consumer. So, I mean, the freshest piece of meat that you can get. And, you know, we have certain USDA requirements that make us, say 14-day shelf life for a steak or for a pork chop and those kind of things. But, you know, knowing that product is coming directly from that facility, I personally make the decision to keep it much longer in my refrigerator before doing that. It's a personal decision. I made sure to say that. I don't recommend that anybody does that, unless you want to. Um, uh, but it is. It's extremely, extremely fresh, and it is so prideful every time I open one of our roll stock packaged steaks and I pull it out and it's dry. It's not like dripping wet with injected, water weight or anything like that. It is truly just an incredible experience. I mean, it is. It's amazing. I'm gonna do it tonight in like 2 hours, and I've eaten two snack sticks since we've been on this call, so I'm ready for that.
How then do you deal with spoilage and making sure as well from like the inventory side that you don't have too much excess inventory for example?
yeah, I mean, we have systems set up, really starting from the production floor. So as everything's coming in, it gets lotted out. We do FIFO in the facility, and then we have a lot of external controls to see like how many weeks of supply that we have on hand. Um, and so there's very little spoilage. I mean, I can't think of an instance this year, Chris, that we were like, crap, that's going to be painful. Um, so, again, it's just about keeping inventory moving and having the tools in place. Again, we're not on a sophisticated like ERP currently, but we know the importance of having those controls in place and have built them just using cloud-based tools and a lot of controls and SOPs that we put in place at the facility to keep that inventory moving.
Cool. Yeah, I imagine that's tough as well, just because you're obviously dealing with expiration dates, and of course you're shipping fresh, which I'd imagine that's difficult. But as you say, you're cutting out a lot of the middlemen that in the kind of traditional grocery chain as well. So so this is obviously a system that's been in place for however long we've been eating meat. So that makes a ton of sense. Or rather, as long as we were buying meat in retail. My final question for you both is: what would you value more? $100 of your inventory, so $100 of, let's say, a Porter Road meat, or $100 cash, and that's $100 of like the price of the meat. Not like the retail value of the meat, but the actual cost that I guess that you value that meat at.
I mean, the value that we can unlock with those cogs, right? You talk about that, the ground beef conundrum. Anybody doing a whole animal operation is, how do you maximize the value of that product? And so it could be $100 worth of ground beef, but we can sell that online for $8 a pound, or we can make it into hot dogs and sell it for $12 a pound, or we can make it into snack sticks and sell it for essentially $18 a pound. So there's a lot we can do with that $100 in cogs, and it's always a combination of those things. But again, we are a direct to consumer business, right? It all starts with the cogs. That's where it all begins for us.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Chris and Ryan, thanks so much for joining me here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Mike. Appreciate it.
And there you have it. It was great chatting with Chris and Andy. Chris and Andy, thanks again so much for coming on the podcast. This podcast is produced by Manufactured. Manufactured helps brands with manufacturing and inventory financing. So if you're a brand that is looking for inventory financing help or manufacturing help, feel free to contact us at manufactured.com. Thanks for listening.